Hello, thank you so much for coming to the Sashiko Live Streaming. This is Atsushi. It is Thursday night live streaming. This is the live streaming where I talk about Sashiko while me doing the Sashiko stitching. If you could bring your stitching project, Sashiko project, or any actually other project to stitch together, to craft together, that'd be great. It is not gonna be any lectures, it's not gonna be any tutorials. It is more like the time together. So if you could bring something, that'd be great. And if you have any questions about Sashiko's culture, not the technical questions, if you have any questions about the cultural part, your comment would be appreciated. Let me check the audio. Okay, perfect. Sorry, it's kind of cold again. ですね、すいません。切り替えが。サシコの配信ありがとうございます。今回じゃなくて木曜日の夜、アメリカ時間の木曜日の夜、日本時間の金曜日の昼は日本語ではなく英語でサシコ配信をします。日本語の配信は、日本時間の金曜日の夜9時半から、アメリカ時間の朝の8時半から行いますので、よかったら来ていただけると嬉しいです。明日です。明日というか今日ですね。日本時間の今日の夜ですね。よろしくお願いします。Alright. That was the Japanese explanation, and I was gonna talk about something today. I completely forgot about it. I had some interviews and oh yes. So today I'm gonna do just stitching for the purpose of stitching. I'm not gonna stitch on any patterns. I will just let the needles run for that. And I would like to ask a question about how you found me for that matter. Recently, I had a few interviews for the media, and as long as they're respectful in the matter of contacting me, I try to get that interview. And in the last couple of those interviews, they have their own understanding of the word Sashiko, which is good because they studied a little bit before they come to me. That's great. At the same time, I had to start explaining the difference between the Sashiko explained in English and the Sashiko I'm trying to share. So I think still the majority of information we can get in English is not the same message I share. So I was wondering how you found me, and I'll talk about those things while I stitch. This is the whole purpose of this live streaming is for me to stitch while talking. So let's start that. Oh, I had a camera here as a background. That's not something I... Anyway. Okay. By the way, usually I will have those kind of nice background. But today I completely forgot about it, so that's also good. And today I will not do any patterns. So it was kind of interesting to I think I did a very, I don't want to say I did a very good job, but I'm trying my best to keep offering the information. And those algorithm picks up that. As the result, I can be, let's place this one. If you Google what is Sashiko, my website comes kind of fairly low on the surface. So I was wondering how people get those information that Sashiko is the word for the mending technique. And if they come to me, how do they really find like how do they find me? If their understanding is Sashiko as the mending or even visible mending, I would like to understand how they connect the information they got and the question they can bring to me. Because I never say that Sashiko is a visible mending, but the questions I receive often is the Sashiko as the visible mending trend, and what do I think about it? So, sorry. Oh, there's a very good advice for Sashiko. Don't eat anything oily before you do Sashiko stitching. I love eating chips while doing Sashiko stitching, but I usually use the chopsticks. I clean the oil this afternoon. I mean, not this afternoon, after the dinner. So my hand is fairly slippery. Oh, this one is for that, actually. Just a second. Until I did. You don't use the pliers, okay? Some people use the pliers or something to force the needle to get it out, but it's not gonna do good. Well, but it is. I have said several times in this live streaming, but personally, I do not like media. Well, because I think because of my past experience, not every experience was good with media. So I don't necessarily love it. The reason is that usually, from my experience, not all media, but some media have written or prepared a script already or have article ready to be published, but they need somebody to sort of back up or some credentials for what they wrote. So they try to get the voice from those who may be in that field. Those media, usually it's very fast media, I would say. They do not really try to understand or communicate what I'm trying to say. Instead, they will cut and paste what I say, and then they sort of use it as they wish. So again, not all the media. Some medias use our voice as the validation of what they do. And what they do has been already decided before the interview. So, and I have had that exactly same experience when I was in Japan. It was a pretty big shock for me. And ever since, I tried to be kind of careful about it. And I'm still being careful, even in the US. Some people say that there's no bad publicities, and I kind of get that there's no bad publicities. At the same time, since what I'm trying to do is the communicate, not being famous or something, I just want to pass down this culture. So it is quite important to choose or be careful, or be mindful what I'm trying to contribute to. So that's why I would like to know or understand how those people find me. I don't think I explained Sashiko's the visible mending even once. But main trend of Sashiko is visible mending, or even being proud of mending the fabric, I would say. There's nothing wrong with mending. There's nothing wrong with mending, but I was wondering, how is that relate to each other? But Sashiko is not the word for the mending only. Mending is a very big part of Sashiko, but the mending and Sashiko does not equal in its context. Well, well. Oh, that's something I would talk about in the coming up lecture with Yoshiko Wada sensei with Slow Fiber Studio and World Shibori Network Foundation. I will talk about Sashiko in English right now. It's going to be 1 hour presentation. So, well, I tried to summarize everything I say here in 1 hour. Let's see how it's going to go. Yeah, it's interesting how Sashiko is becoming something completely different from what I know. And it is okay if that change is done by somebody who know about Sashiko mindfully. I don't really resist that change itself. I'm just worried or even feared that change might just leave the majority of Japanese people behind. We call that 言葉の一人歩き. The word started working itself. It's something I'm observing right now. The word of Sashiko is becoming something. Well, it started its own journey without the parents as the Japanese, I guess. If the word Sashiko is mature enough, there's nothing wrong with it. But since the word of Sashiko is not structured well enough to be matured, it can be quite risky to accept that as is. So let's see how it's gonna go. I'm sorry. Oops. It's really good that some of the media found me. I just want to make sure that I do not create any confusion for them. I've been sharing about Sashiko almost 4 years in English. I mean, my English was not this good. I mean, my English is not that good yet, but by writing a story every single day, by talking every week like this, of course, the language ability get improved. So I think I'm doing better in terms of communicating the contents. So I don't think the message I shared 4 years ago is not exactly the same as today, but the message itself is the same. The vehicle became a little more sophisticated. For that, I really am curious. Well, actually, I wonder how other people react, not react, how other people interpret that message. Just a second, okay, I'm sorry. Just making sure that. Okay. I probably understand what they, or let's say the YouTube followers or viewers are not requiring, wanting, expecting for this channel. They probably want to find the easy solution, easy answer, simple answers that they can follow. Like, for example, this is how to stitch, this is how to draw the patterns, this is, how to is a very simple and easy way to follow the culture. There's nothing wrong with sharing how to, and I do have a lot of videos, so please check those things as well later on. But at the same time, when we focus on the easy technique or very superficial how to, sometimes teacher teaches and the expert teaches the topic saying just because. And this just because is a very dangerous word, because when you teach something, just because is a just because is a sign of lack of information or stories. For example, the industrial revolutions happened in, let's say, 18th century, 19th century. Why? Just because is a little bit too shallow. There are stories, there's reasoning, there's histories behind it. It's the same to any cultural practice for that. So it is my responsibility, my mission to share those stories, why it is like this today, and why it is so important to acknowledge those stories instead of just because. But as long as I know, well, my friends told me that there are quite many Sashiko teachers who teaches just techniques saying just because, or simply. It is simple. It is very simple. At the same time, there's no just because. Is there any just because in my teaching? Or in my story? Just because. Let me see. Why do you stitch the geometric patterns? I do have answers. Why do you use this thread? I have answers. Throw me any questions. Throw me any questions. If you win if I say if my answer is just because. That might be a good challenge for you, for me too. Throw me the question, and if my answer is just because, you win. And I don't think there's any questions like that. Hello, D. That is what is so unfortunate nowadays. Instant gratification. No one wants to take the time and really learn and understand. Yes, well, I am also the one who like the instant gratification. So I rather probably Google if I want to know something instead of reading, piles of books. So I'm not here to criticize the instant gratification. At the same time, there are risks because, especially the craft outside of one's culture, after translation, translation is translation can be, if it's professionally done, it's a very good way to bridge the culture. At the same time, if it's not done by professionals, or if it's done by somebody with lack of information or experience, it can be an interpretation. Instead of translating A to B, it can be A to something else completely because of the interpretation. And there's nothing wrong with interpretation, but the problem, the risk, the dangerous problem is that that interpretation became the original, or even override or even repaint the original contents, because the English is a so strong language. When the original story is not explained by those who understand both languages, both culture, it can be quite dangerous. And when we try to find the answer on the internet, we can find answers as we wish. As long as we try, we keep trying, we can find completely different answers for one question. For example, is being vegan good or bad? My wife was a vegan. I am a Japanese, so it's kind of difficult to be a vegan. But I respect vegans' life. So if I Google, let's say that I don't want her to be vegan, and if I Google what is the benefit of being vegan, well, let's make it like a closed-end question. Is it good or bad to be vegan? Well, of course, I can find both information to be good, like good to be vegan or bad to be vegan. So the question we have right now can be answered in any way we want by the researcher, especially when it is linked to the instant gratification. So is Sashiko technique, or even more specific question, what is the is Sashiko stitches has to be rice grain size? Probably you can find both answer yes and no. But usually it is easier to follow what it is, no matter how much we, as the citizens in developed countries, speak for the freedom. We try to get freedom of everything. We like rules. We need rules to follow to feel secured or to feel safe. And I think that's another reason that my message is kind of too troublesome to be communicated, because I don't offer those answers, because there's no answers. I can make answers, but I don't want to make answers, because if I make answers, probably many people follow that. It is not my goal to be the leader. I just want to make sure that there's nothing left behind. So my goal is not to be a leader or somebody who lead or who makes this trend. So I think it is very important for me to understand what's going on. I'm one of the citizens of this world, so I don't really deny what it is right now. But at the same time, it is very important to understand how it is going right now to protect what I do from. Unfortunately, there's an intentional ignorance. That's what I'm fighting for. Those people who intentionally ignore or try to even shut me up somehow. I don't know how, but because I'm not gonna stop talking. That's really, I'm the self-employed, and I don't really have sponsors, because I know the sponsors will limit what I have to say. So I don't take sponsors unless they let me talk freely. And there's no sponsors probably who want me to talk freely. But that's okay, because I don't have to, I don't have to work for the money. So nobody can shut me up for that. What I was talking about? I lost my track. Just a second, okay? What was I talking about? Oh, instant gratification? But the answer is always almost must to have in this society. You have to have a definition, logical definition, and answers to even get attention. Again, there's nothing wrong with instant gratification in general, but my daughter is 7 years old, and she became 7 years old a few days ago. She received the 500 pieces puzzle, like jigsaw puzzle. And I used to love jigsaw puzzle when I was a kid, where there were no cell phone. Right? I had a Super Nintendo games console, so it's not like I have nothing to play with. But I really enjoyed the jigsaw puzzle in my childhood. And while doing the jigsaw puzzle with my daughter, I remember how fun it was. But she's 7 years old, and she did not like the process of making puzzle. And she asked me to complete it because she wants to have a result hanged in her room. So that's kind of the Sashiko I am looking at right now. I think the purpose of jigsaw puzzle is to use your brain or use your hand to enjoy those pieces, right? If one wants to get just result, they can get a painting. But we do get the puzzle because we enjoy the process. I think it's the same as Sashiko too. Like, if the jigsaw puzzle has a numbers on the back side, and if you have to just place it one by one, I don't find it interesting either. That's so many rules, so many directions of things what we do. Of course, there's a way to, do better, especially in a jigsaw puzzle. Nobody should start, well, not nobody, but usually we, as an amateur of not experienced puzzle people, usually start from the edge, right, this side. If there's this frame, not a frame, this square, we should probably start with the corners instead of starting from the middle. So there are technique and wisdom to enjoy that craft or hobby, but it is not always good to have the answer or specific direction. I think Sashiko is like that too. Direction is great, some techniques is great, but I don't find that interesting to just follow the rules. And even more, it is perfectly fine to want the result. Like, let's say that I want to have a result of Sashiko pieces, that's perfectly fine. But the person who enjoys Sashiko as the result, or let's say like the people who wear the Sashiko jacket, and they know that they don't stitch, they cannot claim them as the Sashiko stitcher or artisan, and they shouldn't teach how to stitch because they get the result done. And there's nothing wrong with getting the result done. It's just a different rules, different roles. But it's more like misrepresenting who they are. So it's very difficult right now. Well, has been difficult. Has been difficult that there are so many rules. And this is what you do. Yeah. I'm not a police. I don't want to be like a cultural police to go around and talk to everybody that it's wrong or it's not good. It's horrible to do it because, again, my message is there's no right and wrong. So it is not my, mission to do it. At the same time, of course, I sometimes get frustrated, and especially some of the students, some of my friends who learn Sashiko from me get frustrated. But they know my stance as well. They know that I keep saying that there's no answers, there's no right and wrong. They cannot say that the Sashiko is wrong. Again, the Sashiko is not wrong. That's just not enough. So it's very interesting to observe this change. Change is good. I'm not denying the change. What I want to do is just to make sure that that change is mindful. I don't think it's impossible. It's extremely difficult to do it in this life, especially where the internet is like this. And I was probably too late to speak up. It's still not too late to do it, but I have to expect some pain or challenges. It's too late to do it without pain or challenges. But it's okay, I'm willing to take that risk or pain. So yeah, how do you find this channel, this account, and how do you decide to follow those? Because I'm pretty sure that some of my message can be pretty uncomfortable. I say a lot of comfortable message in Japanese because I'm not worried about Japanese Sashiko in Japan so much. I mean, some people, they are still my friends, Japanese friends, who keep saying that, Atsushi, you gotta be worried about it. You should be more strict. You should be more mindful about Japanese Sashiko in Japan. I don't. Personally, I'm not worried about it. But I am worried about Sashiko in English. That's why I make sometimes very strong statement, which is honest statement. Honest, yeah. And it can be very uncomfortable. And I am aware of that. And that's another reason that there are many people following what I'm doing, which is okay. But there are people like you who watch this right now, who try to follow, try to listen, even if it's not comfortable or convenient or good to listen. I really like to connect those gaps. Let's simplify it. I would like to know what I can do better. That's probably an ultimate question right now I have in my mind. What can I do better to communicate so that let's say the producer or writer find Sashiko as not visible mending technique yet associated with mending. So I think the information I write is not strong enough. The information I share is not strong enough to get them. So I have to change or add something more. At the same time, Sashiko is now popular because of the big trend of sustainability. And if they approach the Sashiko from that perspective, mending can be the first word they look at. In that case, probably Sashiko is probably just a small rock on the big stream. Hello, thank you so much for coming, Leiko-san. ありがとうございます。So, well, the good part of me is not a good part. The good thing about what I do is that I don't have to worry about myself much. I don't have to pay extra attention to somebody to be partnershiped. I mean, I can say whatever I want. That's a good part of what I do right now. Sometimes, not recently, like not last 12 months, I guess, but in 2019, 2 years ago, year and a half ago, for some reason I had so many comments that I own the response, I own the explanation to the bigger general public. If I'm gonna say that English, like Sashiko in English is not wrong but insufficient, they say that I own the explanation, or I have a responsibility to explain that gap. And there was many other counter comments saying that I don't, he doesn't own anything to them. But I do feel responsible. I do feel responsible for that. I mean, I do feel responsible, and that's the reason I keep sharing. But I don't think I owe anything for anyone at this moment. Well, I do have many people who I wanna list their name on my, book. If I write a book, I wanna, I have so many people's name who has been helping me to be like me. So there are a lot of people who I owe to that purpose, but there are no specific entity that I have to follow their opinions with bending my own ideas. This is the ideal situation. Many people, like the people who support me, are the people who understand what I'm trying to say. So for that, I'm very much in a good place. I just want to make sure that. Make sure? make sure might not be the good word, but yeah, it is interesting that the whole story started when I received several interviews from media this week or last week. Two of the interviewer asked the same question actually, like, how do I think about mending as Sashiko as the mending in this main trend of sustainability? Well, actually, their question was more specific. What is your art, Sashiko, can do to contribute to the mending in sustainability? So I think for them it is the art helping the sustainability, and that's why it is sort of a different angle to cut it. It is very interesting to see that. Well, hello, thank you so much for the comments. This is one of the today's topic I brought. The Sashiko has not been dead yet. Some people talk as if Sashiko is in the past already. Like, we cannot make boro anymore, authentic boro anymore. We cannot do the Sashiko we can find in the books anymore. We cannot do those things anymore. It is more difficult, more rare to have those things because we have choice to not to do it. But it doesn't mean that there are nobody who can do those things. So Sashiko, there are still Sashiko people, Sashiko artisans, especially rising artisans right now, thanks to this trend, who are able to do those things. So I think it is our responsibility to support those people too, instead of just saying those things. Oh, thank you, Lara. Let me read the comments. I can stitch while talking, but I cannot stitch while reading English. I can stitch while reading Japanese, but I cannot stitch while reading English. I looked up Sashiko first, found the store with good information, then your videos. Your voice matters, and correct a book I got in a kit that is part of the mending you are talking about. Thank you. Yeah. I hope that I'm making myself clear for that, but I don't think there is any wrong information, especially even the book or small brochure in the kit. Those informations are not wrong. They are not wrong, but it does not explain the whole picture of Sashiko. So as long as one keep listening, as long as one keep learning what Sashiko can be, I think we will have less, we won't have any issues as long as we acknowledge it. That's my standing point for the cultural appropriation. There's no, well, it might be too much to say there's no such a thing as cultural appropriation, because there are, but it does not matter for me who practice Sashiko. The ethnicity, color, age, gender doesn't really matter to me. Anybody can do Sashiko if they want to, unless they, but only one condition, if they try to understand the Japanese culture behind the word Sashiko. If they say that they don't care about the Japanese culture behind the word Sashiko, then what's the point of using the Japanese word for their stitching? In that case only, I would consider that as the cultural appropriation, because they're getting profit out of the cultural practice and also the word. But that's pretty much the only one case, and unfortunately there are those accounts or people who blogs, probably they shut down the information from me because it's not convenient to them. It is okay to have a different opinion. It's perfectly fine to have the disagreement. But as long as they try to keep listening, I guess, then, the stitcher like Lara will keep talking about those things to others. As the result, this culture will be somewhere left. Wow, I stitched myself pretty badly. So, thank God. When I was stitching very deeply, very intensively, sometimes I don't feel any pain by stitching. It's okay. I think the stitcher has those moments. This needle is extremely sharp, so sometimes I don't feel the pain, and not feeling the pain is okay. I have done that. The severe case is that I don't see any blood, although I probably stitched this much into my fingers. In that case, I have a pretty thick, but it's not even calces or the thick skin. It's just my body. As an example, the book says to trim all the cleanly first. A live streaming of yours on the concept traditions and showing the frayed fabric as lending warmth is so important to my understanding. Yeah, thank you. Mending wise, yes, there are books and there are many people say that we have to trim the edge before mending. You can, of course you can, but it's not the answer. For example, even this one, I trim the edge, I machine stitch the edge so that it doesn't fray out while I'm stitching. It's just the wisdom, it's just the one idea. So is mending as well. But did I talk about why I do not, or we actually don't trim the edge? I think I talked about it somewhere. Again, it's not just because. Many people say just because, but it's not just because. There are reasons why we do not trim the edge. Many actually, not even one. Several reasons. Thinking time. No, I'm just kidding. I'm gonna just jump into answer. Yeah, it might be interesting to have those things like a question and answer, but I'm still waiting for the question for me to answer just because. If you can come up with that, you win. I don't like. You need probably prize. I'll think about what I can set. Wow. Anyway, there are reasons why I personally, or we don't really trim the edge or even fix the edge to patch or to mend. Is it okay to answer? Should I wait a little bit? Well, I think we have enough time to think about it. The reason is that the mending is not the end of everything. And mending is just a part of the process, even probably the beginning of that story. Mending is never gonna be the end of the story or project or even journey for that matter. Unfortunately, when we focus on the visual or outcome or how it would look like after stitching, they are already looking at the end of the patchwork as the art. But that's not the essence of Sashiko. Or even for mending, actually. So it is very important to understand that if you add the mending, you probably have to add more later on. So it's not the ending of project or story. Therefore, I prefer to not to trim the edge because it's going to be more natural. On top of that, I'm lazy, so. But being lazy is a pretty important concept to be good Sashiko artisans too. Yes, it was really well explored, and you should borrow to be fabric. This was 2 years ago. 2 years ago. Thank you so much for remembering that. Of course, I don't remember where I said that. But yeah, that's the point. I hope I said exactly the same thing. Well, I should make more videos. So yes, borrowed to be is a very, and I always use that expression. Once we start mending, that's the beginning of the fabric. Sorry, the beginning of the second life of the second life of the fabric. The more we add stitching, the more it requires attention. So as the result, it is not realistic to trim everything before mending. But that's the biggest difference is where we look at. The menders who look at the result as the outcome, which some of them probably want to put that into the behind the glass, like a display glass. Meanwhile, I like to use that, and if I use it, of course it's going to require another fixing. That's probably the biggest. And there's nothing wrong with focusing on the result, and it is perfectly fine to display that on the museum or anywhere, studio if you have it. That's perfectly fine, and there's nothing wrong with that to call it borrowed Sashiko at all. But if one wants to teaching or sharing to others that it is the Sashiko to display it, then without knowing what I'm sharing right now, then that's a problem. Because they are sort of filtering the other side of the stories. So if they can share those stories and then call this stitching Sashiko, I'm perfectly fine with that. And I don't think I'm asking too much. I don't know. Am I asking too much? I don't think so. I may be, but in my understanding, it's not too much to ask. But for some, probably it is. Anyway, it is just stitching after all. It's not like rocket science. Or, there's no PhD program for this. It's just a matter of learning the basic and apply it to whatever you want to do. I say whatever, it's like whatever is really the term for that. Whatever you like to do. Just learn the basic or even the form. The good analogy is the cooking, the home cooking. Learn how to use cutting board and knife first. Then you can cook anything as you want. If you use only kitchen scissors to cook everything. There's nothing wrong with the kitchen scissors. There's nothing wrong with the kitchen scissors. But don't teach cooking as if using the kitchen scissors is the only tool to or skill to cook. Because there are still people who use the cutting board knife. That's how twisted the view I'm looking at right now. And it's quite unfortunate for that, because it's good to be able to use both, right? I mean, if I can use the both kitchen scissors and also knife and a cutting board, that's both good. It's not A or B, it's A and then B. I just don't understand why some people deny the adding the option. I really don't. But again, that's how this world is now, so I have to keep speaking up. In the past, were clothes stitched on before being worn out as the preventative measure? What do you think? Sorry, it's my bad habit, but what do you think? It is. The mending is, they did not want to do mending. That's why they stitched. So mending is the last result. They did not want to do mending. That's why I keep saying that Sashiko is not word for the mending. So they stitched first so that the fabric becomes stronger, and then they can avoid mending. And it's really easy to imagine, right? It's so easy to imagine because we've been there in any kind of probably culture. I don't want to use the word poor or poverty, but we were there. Not we as the people right now, but our ancestors were at some point somewhere like there. So it is so easy to imagine that if we have time to do it. Then the difference is, you may wonder what is the difference between Sashiko and other stitching. There's nothing. There's no difference. It happened to have the word for us. And that word is hugely and deeply related to the culture we cultivated. We developed. That's why I keep saying it is extremely important to understand the Japanese culture when they talk about Sashiko. Because otherwise there's nothing different from other stitching or mending. So yes, in the past they were. So for example, my artisans hated mending because that's kind of failure for them. They didn't stitch enough to make the fabric stronger. So I don't think anybody liked mending besides me or my mother for that matter. Anybody? No, I don't think so. They hated my distressed denim when I had one of those. Thank you so much for the comments, Jen. Have you ever thought about writing a book about Sashiko? There have been a few lately, but some of them are more Sashiko inspired than proper Sashiko. Yes, I would like to write a book one day, and I have had several suggestions from the publisher or publishing agent. It is very honor to have those emails or contact. The problem is that they want to sell how-to book. Not a sell, I'm sorry. Buy. They cut it off. I'm sorry, I'm going to probably edit. They would like to publish a book based on how to do Sashiko because it sells better. Oopsie. So I can write a book. Like, let's say they want me to write a book about Sashiko. They can have the stories about Sashiko, like what I'm talking right now, but they have to have the how-to because that's what the audience, or at least the people who buy the books from that specific publisher are. If they buy a book saying how to do Sashiko, and then if they open the book, the first statement is there's no right and wrong in Sashiko, that's a kind of a big mismatching. And I do not plan to teach how to do Sashiko in book because that can create a huge misunderstanding. And I'm pretty scared of that. The misunderstanding is very scary. The people read only what they want to read. I have learned that so much. So I cannot write how-to book because it is so dangerous to leave the documents as if I make a rules, I make a step to follow. As long as we follow that steps and rules, they are doing the authentic Sashiko. I cannot make that kind of book because then that end up with filtering those other Sashiko stitches. And probably the more I filter the other Sashiko, the better book sells. And I don't want that to happen. So, I'm kind of difficult for that. That's why I have not published the book yet. But if I am trying to, when I have time for that, when I have time, I would like to publish a book, summarize the story. But sometimes it's kind of slow, I guess. The books are great, but it's kind of slow and it's kind of urgent in my understanding. Some people say I'm too late. It is too late for me to speak up. And I really understand that it is important to write a book. Self-publishing is a great way to do it. But I probably should focus on this kind of thing. Instagram every day, social media, the YouTube, so I can connect to you specifically, directly, instead of hoping that somebody might catch that idea. It is so different from the English common sense. It is quite difficult to feel natural about it. That's one of the biggest feedback to my account. Many, you're not only one or not. They say that your account is pretty uncomfortable to follow, but the more I follow your account, the better I realize I understand what you're trying to say. Did you have to say that first half? You didn't have to say that your account is uncomfortable to follow. But I understand. I agree that my account is not that comfortable to follow. Thank you, Sherry. Never too late to speak up. It is true. Never too late to speak up. But there are things have changed so much already. So sometimes speaking up can cause the pain. And it's not me who say that it is too late to speak up. It's somebody who is very experienced in this field advised me that it is too late to speak up, and she probably worried about me a lot. She did not want me to be hurt. And what I understood from her advice is that it is too late to speak up without feeling any pain. So I have to expect, I have to be ready, I have to expect that. I am experiencing it right now every day. By me speaking up, I get a lot of, I don't want to say hatred, but not an enemy. But because the Sashiko became completely different already, my word is too uncomfortable for some of those. As the result, I have to go through the pain. So for that, it is too late. For that. But in general, there's nothing too late to speak up. But it is too late to speak up with expecting that I will feel no pain. I hope it makes sense. So And it's okay as long as I expect the pain. And I was probably not ready in 2019. That's why I went through a lot of pain. But I am now ready to take that. So that's why I'm not worried about it. Otherwise, I won't do this. If I think it is too late to speak up, I'm not doing this anymore. But I was very naive to be welcomed by everybody. As the result, and in fact, it was not like that. I suppose a North American style of how-to books also goes against the tradition of learning by watching, or the master-apprentice style of learning you have written about. Yes, and even Japanese culture or society follow that American style. My generation is too late. I mean, I don't want to say too late, but my generations are very much Americanized. So it is probably it's not the style anymore. It is not the style anymore. It is more important to be efficient or productive. Many people say that it's ridiculous to spend 10 years to be a sushi chef. You should go to just sushi school. I understand. Yes, that's probably true. But for Sashiko, because of my experience, there are things that I cannot teach by just in a single book or few hours of teaching. I think if I have 6 months, I can teach somebody everything. So opening a school might be one option, but that doesn't do the job. That's not gonna do the job because it's not that complicated. I don't want anybody to waste six months of time. They don't need that 6 months to find their own Sashiko. So yeah, it is quite difficult. So writing a book itself is already a system of Western writing a book itself is already in the Western system. So it is ideal to have a book written, and I'm hoping to make it done one day. But of course, I have to worry about if it's gonna sell or not when I work with the publisher. I don't want them to make any loss. So as the result, I don't have any books published. I think it's okay for now. I am very much in hurry to speak up, but I'm not in hurry of leaving the documents. Because I don't have to be the writer for that matter. As long as there are people who can understand what I'm saying and who can write. It doesn't have to be me who write the book. So as long as I leave the sort of raw materials, this live streaming is one raw materials, what I write on the Instagram without those proofreading. Well, I do a lot of proofreading, but without constructing as one book is like a field of raw materials. If somebody can modify those information to make a book, it does not have to be me. So I guess the priority right now is to leave as many raw materials possible. Then if I have time in the future, probably when the Sashiko's trend is gone, then probably I can focus on writing. But in that time, nobody might be interested in Sashiko, then it might be self-published, because if there's no trend, the publisher might not want to publish to begin with. Either way, I'm not too much worried about it, to be honest. I probably shouldn't say this in live streaming, but I was worried, and I am worried, and I was in fear But the more I continue this journey, the more I teach workshop, the more I speak up, I might not see the change in my life, but some of the people who are trying to learn from me may be able to find something. The worst case scenario is the worst and the most unfortunate case scenario is there are no raw materials to left. There's no voices left. As the result, even the people with good intention cannot realize the difference, cannot acknowledge the difference. That's the worst case scenario. I'm a big believer. I don't like human per se, but I believe the theory of that humans are all good. Like, we are decent by birth. So I'm trying to leave as much as I can. Can you mention again where to find info for upcoming talk? Oh, yes. I did not put it. God. I did not put it. Just a second, okay? Oops. Oops. Sorry about that. That's bad. Just a second, okay? I thought I put it already. Ah. Just a second, okay? I'll get the link. But at the same time, I probably shouldn't say this. But being honest is my, my most important thing. So I'll be honest. Don't tell that to the organizer. If you follow my live streaming, you might not find anything new. It's a very good summary of what I've been saying last couple of years in the 1 hour. So if you would like to understand what I'm trying to speak up, it is a very good summary, and I have done that several times already. It's not completely new from that because my message is always the same. My message is always the same throughout, so I cannot change the contents drastically. So if you have watched my lecture previously, might not find it, but at the same time it is a very good way to support the Slow Fiber Studio, and also I respect them. I respect them for trying to sustain the culture. I'm doing it by myself because I cannot afford to hire somebody else. That's why I really respect them, because they're trying to enlarge the organization so that they can leave more voices. I am too chicken and I'm too traumatized to enlarge what I do. As the result, I just focus on myself within my own capacity. So there are things I can do and I cannot do. I really respect them for they're doing pretty much what I do in a different field, which is dyeing. I mean, dye, like, coloring things. So yeah, it's if you that's a very good way to support them, and if you don't mind listening the similar stories from me, that's a very good way to join. But I just don't want to expect that you will get something extremely new or something that you don't get here. I'm not that. I'm not that, how can I say, I'm not that organized or crafty or efficient to slice this much amount of the information is going to be in the lecture and this much is going to be here. I'm not that good. Especially in English, I'm not that good. Oopsie. I will just... Thank you so much for this. I will just write down about the next coming up. Sorry, just a second, okay. Next coming up live streaming talk event. But yeah, again, like it is a very good way to support them. Okay. It's okay to say those things because I don't want them, like I don't want anybody here to be disappointed. Oh, Atsushi is just saying the same thing over and over again. I am saying the same thing over and over again because there are always a possibility of somebody new. And I should be saying something different every time I have a, those talk event. One day I say that Sashiko is the mending technique, and the other day, like I said, Sashiko is not the mending technique. It's really confusing, right? It shouldn't be like that. I've been saying exactly the same thing in the last 2 years or 3 years. So don't undersell myself. Well, that makes me Japanese. Thank you. Now that makes me nervous. But thank you. I will do my best. I was gonna say something. I completely forgot about it. Like, what was that? So yeah, that's the book part. That's the lecture part. Not lecture, talk part. Everything else is just me stitching. I cannot believe it has been like almost an hour and 50 minutes. I'll probably finish in 15 minutes when the clock hit the 10:30 p.m. here. If you have any questions about Sashiko cultural Sashiko talk, I'm happy to answer that here. Or if it's too long, I can carry it to the next live session. If you're watching this as the archive, you can leave the comment. If that requires answers, I will make sure to cover that in the next live streaming. If you can come up with the questions that my answer is going to be just because you win, no. I don't think there is. Yeah. Don't romanticize Sashiko. That's probably my message here. And their message too. The fact that we can stitch together like this over internet, the spending time together, stitching ideally, or anything is actually fine. That's the core of Sashiko from the cultural perspective. I share the unshin, the technique, core technique and essence in my workshop as the technical perspective, but from the cultural perspective, the time we can spend together like this while doing something together is probably the most important part of Sashiko, and this defines what Sashiko is quite well. So we are in the right track. sometimes we're very busy. It is extremely busy. We are living in a very busy world. Like last year in the COVID, I could not do any live streaming frequently because I was too tired. It was too difficult to expect what's gonna happen. Like one day the school is cancelled, one day school is open. 1 month school got cancelled remotely, so it was almost impossible to plan things. This year, thanks to the advice from Japanese friend, I force myself to have a live streaming once a week, at least. At least becomes at most, but for example, today I was probably too tired to do the live streaming if I did not force myself to come here, to sit down in front of the computer. But that makes the rhythm of this live streaming, and that makes Sashiko more Sashiko, for that matter. And sometimes, as the viewer, as the participant from the other side of the screen, if you're busy, you don't have to join that, but that busy part is gonna ruin the rhythm. So if you can force yourself to join, that's gonna give you a good rhythm. But at the same time, as I understand, it's not reasonable to expect everybody here for every time I offer. I cannot probably offer every single weekend. Weekend every single week. But that's kind of the balance we have to think about of the ordinary, repetitive ordinary versus the busy, efficient day. So I feel bad for my friends in Europe, because this is the worst time for them to join. But at the same time, this is the only time I can sort of feel free. After everything, after cleaning the dishes, after putting my daughter into the bed. So that's what this live streaming is for. Of course, you can learn something new every time you watch it. I don't edit anything. You are watching the Sashiko stitching as the Japanese Sashiko artisans would do in front of you. So next time, maybe you can tell us who brought Sashiko to US. I now hear of 2 new people but have not heard of them until now. Who is a very difficult question, because there are many people who brought Sashiko to the US, I guess. I just don't know them. I I don't know. I really don't know anything about Sashiko in the US before the Sashiko became the trend. And the fact that it's not left, there was not a big movement. I would like to know, I would like to learn that, but at the same time, I know how Sashiko developed in Japan, and that was quite big. Not a big, spread it all over. So that's a very good point, but the answer is I don't know. But there are many people who were practicing Sashiko. Unfortunately, the problem is that we cannot find their voices. If you can find, please share with me. I would gladly, I might pay for that to That's how important it is. If I can find any documents in English that like a raw voice, let's say 30 years ago, there might be the person like me who tried to introduce Sashiko in English. If there's any documents, any videos of her or him talking about Sashiko, that's the great information that I have to know. I'm talking about Sashiko in English based on the fact that I can get information from right now. Yes. So Sashiko was here in almost 30 years ago, 40 years ago. Sashiko was already translated somehow. That's the lady who gave me the advice that it's too late to speak up. But she knew me when I was 5 years old or so in Japan. So she knew Sashiko back then. And I was 5 years old, which means 33 years ago. So there was a word Sashiko. There are books, like a magazine article talking about Sashiko, and I do have it somewhere, I guess. But the point is, they did not succeed that. If they have succeeded, there should be Sashiko before me, or like there gotta be a Japanese who is like a legend in Sashiko right now, like at this moment. Like shibori is also the Japanese term for the tie-dye, right? And we have a legend called Wada Yoshiko Sensei, and that's the person who I respect. That's the person who is arranging that talk. But she introduced shibori 40 years ago, probably more years ago, to the US. She established, she was getting the point. She was accurate. She was doing a great job. And she has been doing a great job since. As the result, we know her when we learn shibori. We have, pretty much everybody who does shibori in English know her, I guess. I even knew her, so. But we don't have that kind of person, a Japanese person who does that. There are many Japanese people, Japanese Sashiko crafters who can speak English now. But 30 years ago, 40 years ago, like how the Japanese brought Sashiko to the US in the history, it's a very long story to, it's a very good topic to research. I think we have to do the research project for that. Yeah, if you find anything, let me know. It's probably my work to do, but if you find anything, please let me know. I'm quite interested in that. It was difficult to leave the documents, though. It was very difficult to leave the voice because there were no social media, there were no YouTube. If I don't have a social media and YouTube, I wouldn't be able to leave any voices. It's extremely difficult, almost impossible to do that. So it is not, it is just unfortunate. Whew. Okay. Thank you very much for following. Not following, I'm sorry. Thank you very much for joining the live streaming. I hope that you had a good time to stitch and listen and talk together. The purpose of this live streaming is again to spend same time together while stitching or doing something. Also, I would like to leave the raw raw archive, raw materials of what we do. So that'd be great if you can join us again in the future. I try to be here on every Thursday night. If you could click the like button, that'd be really appreciated. I recently learned that the YouTube algorithm changes and I don't want to be banned by having some minus. I think I have some spam or haters following me, so I always get the like a bad reviews. They got removed after all, but there's some bad reviews might affect the channel, so that'd be great if you could click the like button. Everything else, you can find the information from the description area. I do have a website. I do have probably, if you're new to Sashiko, there are tons of videos available. I'm not good at editing, so it's not good quality. It's not probably entertaining, but at the same time, it is educational. There are a lot of information available there. YouTube, my website, Instagram. There's so much information there, and if you feel like there are more you need, more personal attention, please consider the workshop or online class so I can be there for you to make you be able to stitch like we do. Okay. Maybe people moved here from Japan. Could you contact folks? I will. Ooh. It's a good, we have to probably do that. I first heard of Sashiko in the late 1990s, but I never looked into it then. I wonder how I had heard of it. Yes, so the late 1990s, the Sashiko was already in English. And I don't know who translated the Sashiko to the little stabs. It probably happened around that time. Maybe, well, we don't really know. We have to just imagine for that. I clearly remember using a little stab in my shop. Like I made the English version of the shop card, like shop small brochure to put into the bag. And I I wrote that English sentence when I was in high school, which is the late 1990s. And I clearly remember that I used the little stabs. I don't know how I got it, the little stabs. I may translate it from Sashiko. I don't think I could have done that. But at the same time, I may have looked at that little word from somewhere. But that was 1997. It was 1997 also. There were Sashiko in English before that, for sure. It's just a matter of how. I'm probably just in the West Coast, California, LA area, I guess. Not in New York, maybe yes, but not like this today, all over the world. To be honest, it is not that important who did it. It is important what they wrote, what they left. It goes to me too. It doesn't have to be me to leave this raw materials. It is the message itself is the most important thing. So, Sashiko is more than mending, or Sashiko is the process. But my message is more important than who is sharing that. Then who try to understand is more important than how many are trying to learn that. So that's kind of the magic of numbers and people. But that's how I like to contribute this Sashiko culture. So if you can teach me anything, please do. I'm open to any informations, but please bring the source. Opinions are a little bit too much to accept right now because I talk I talk based on the memories. There's no documents left, but it's not opinion. I used to accept a lot of opinions, and that was very difficult. So yes, if you have any questions, leave the comments on the live streaming. Otherwise, I'll see you next Thursday. Thank you so much and have a good night. Bye bye.